What's good, Super Riders? Here's a trials move that's super helpful no matter what bike you ride. This technique is called the wheelbase hop, and essentially it's moving your bike one whole wheelbase forward. Now you can do it at slow speed or you can do it at high speed, but it's always best to learn slow speed first so that you can apply it easily once you've got some momentum. It seems like a relatively straightforward movement to throw your bike forward one full wheelbase, but actually there's a lot of nuance, and I'm gonna break it all down for you right now. In a previous video on this channel, we talked about a movement called the lunge, which is very similar, where your front wheel is somewhere and you're jumping up with your back wheel to replace where your front wheel was. And that movement was a bit more of a vertical movement. This move is a lot like the lunge, just in a horizontal way. To break this whole thing down, I want to talk about 4 different things that are going to happen. We're going to talk about what your body's doing. We're going to talk about what your bike is doing. We're going to talk about what your pedals are doing. Then we're going to talk about what your brakes are doing. Those 4 different things make up all the little nuances that are going to happen in this process to get your bike to jump a whole wheelbase forward. Now, spoiler alert, there's a move called a surge where you use a big pedal kick to kick the entire bike forward. But the one drawback of that is that you can't do it at speed. You have to be at a stop to be able to get the proper amount of power out of the pedal kick. So this movement is pretty helpful when you have a little bit of momentum, when you're riding on the trail, when you're riding in between sections. All of this is going to work out no matter what speed you're going. We're going to remove all the momentum for now and just focus on the core technique of what you're doing. And I'm going to go back to those 4 things I talked about. So let's start with what your body is doing during this whole thing. What you're going to be doing is kind of hinging down and back and then hopping your body forward diagonally to pull the bike not only up but forward. And the bike is going to follow the first half. And then what you're going to do is shoot the bike out in front of you. So you've lifted the bike off the ground. And now the higher you're able to pull the bike off the ground, the more time you have to go before it lands. So the secret sauce of this movement is actually pulling the bike up and then pushing it out in front of you. The more time you have in the air, obviously the farther you can go. So you're kind of creating this slingshot with your body where you've kind of crouched down and then you shot forward and pulled the bike along with it. The next 2 things that are really important, these are the tiny little nuances that are gonna help make this whole thing happen on top of what your bike and body are doing, are what your pedals and your brakes are doing. With my pedals, I'm doing a bunny hop motion. So that same kick, that same scoop that you do on the pedals when you do a bunny hop, that's what I'm using to pull the bike up into the air. Now the brakes are kind of interesting here, and this is why I think this move builds on top of the lunge technique that we just did, is that I'm letting off the brakes just a little bit so it rocks back, and then I can create some momentum to move forward. So if you practice the lunge where you're up on that back wheel and you let go of the brakes just a little bit to kind of rock into place, it's the same exact thing here. You're not totally letting off the brakes and hoping for the best. You're just easing off the brakes enough so you can create that extra little momentum to get the bike moving forward. So this move is actually really hard to explain. There's a reason why you haven't been able to find this tutorial anywhere else. It's very challenging to understand all the different nuances that go into this maneuver to make it actually work. But I'm going to give you a handful of slow-mos from different angles where you can see exactly what's happening as I do this. I'll do different obstacles, I'll do it on flat, just so you get a really great feeling. Just know that you can start practicing this on flat ground. You don't have to go to the triangles of death to start it out. Our first drill is actually going to be on flat ground, and this is a great way to get this whole process started. You may have already even practiced this, and essentially what it is, it's jumping up to back wheel. Now you might have used your pedal kick to get there, you might have endoed to get up onto the back wheel eventually, but this one is going to be a little bit more power move, because what we're trying to do is move the bike around and really throw it where we want it to be. We're going to go from 2 tires to back tire, and we're going to do it basically without brakes. We're just going for like the big hoo-ha to get it into place. And what that's going to do, it's going to start getting you moving the bike. It's going to get you comfortable throwing the bike where you want it to be and hopping up to back wheel. This is actually one of the more common use cases for this move, where you have 2 tires on something and you want to throw the bike to be on the back wheel. So this is going to get you started working on this process. You don't necessarily need to work on getting your back wheel exactly where your front wheel was, because that's where we're going. But as you start, just focus on going 2 tires to 1 tire. And you can see how far you can jump forward on it if you want to start doing that, but just focus on that one movement, 2 tires to 1 tire, and do that repeatedly until you feel confident doing it. Moving on to the next drill. This one you can also do on flat ground, or you can find a curb or a pallet to do this. And what we're gonna do, we're gonna start working on the actual wheelbase lunge itself, where you're gonna put your front wheel on the line or on the curb, and we're gonna hop our bike forward to it. So this one might even feel a little bit like the lunge if you have your front wheel up on the curb. And the best part is you can actually shorten the distance that you're going, right? So you don't have to do the entire wheelbase and just try to do the whole thing. What I would recommend is actually rolling your front wheel onto the obstacle a little bit to just get a small jump going. And then as you get more confident with it, as you start to get the technique a little bit more locked in, you can kind of back away a little bit farther and farther and farther from it until your front wheel is on the ledge or on the line itself and you're jumping the whole way. One really big tip when it comes to doing the wheelbase hops in general is to try to come at it at as much of an angle as you possibly can. The reason for this is actually closes the gap of how far you actually have to jump the bike. So if you ever see me do this on the triangles or anything else, I'm not going straight onto it. I'm trying to make as much of an angle possible so that I don't have to jump the bike a full wheelbase. So if you can at all, twist your wheel a little bit closer to it. If you remember back to the lunges that we were working on, we would hop our front wheel onto a ledge and then we would turn as close as we possibly could to get our back wheel as close to the ledge as possible before we made the jump. Same exact thing applies here with the wheelbase hops. And if you're having a hard time getting it done, maybe try a little bit tighter of an angle to see if that helps you close the gap and make it a little bit easier to do the job. What I like to think about is going toward my front foot side so that my back foot can kind of push the bike into the position that I need it to go. I'm gonna hit you with some more slow-mos of this so you really lock in all the different things that are going on. Make sure to pay attention to what my body's doing. Pay attention to the bike, the pedals, and the brakes. Those are the 4 different elements that you're gonna wanna lock in on this whole thing. Here's a pro tip watching this on YouTube. If you want to slow down my slow motion footage even more, there's actually an option in the settings in the YouTube player to make my footage slow-mo. So you can take my slow-mo and slow-mo it even more. I think the button's actually right next to the subscribe button. So the cool thing about the wheelbase hop is not only is it helpful getting you out of tight spots, you can do it at speed or at a standstill, but you can also do some cool variations from it. There's all kinds of cool little drops and things you can do. You can mix it in with lunges. It's just a really helpful move that helps connect a lot of your other riding together. So I talked a lot during this video about the lunge technique, and if you haven't looked at it already, the video for it is right here. Definitely go check that out if you haven't already.